right, we thought we'd interrupt this sort of political Monday with a little Cyber Monday. Say what? Because that number you're seeing, 6.6 billion, we've never seen it before. We could be looking at the biggest online shopping day in American history. Now, inflation-adjusted terms, that's a whole nother thing. But the bottom line is a lot of people were doing a lot of buying when they should have been working. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and you are watching Your World or Shopper's World. Well, I think company bosses across the country have gotten kind of used to this. Their elves should be busy doing the thing that their companies tell them they should be doing and not going online and buying. But a lot of them were doing a lot of buying, and I mean a lot of buying. Not that FBN's Lauren Simonetti was taking her nose off the grindstone here, but apparently a lot of other people were.
I did my damage on Black Friday, Neil, to be honest.
That's fine.
Cyber Monday, I really haven't taken part, but as of this morning, we do have some fresh numbers. Adobe Analytics takes $840 million spent online, putting this Cyber Monday on track to be the biggest online shopping day in history. This comes on top of Black Friday and Thanksgiving spending, which together rang up $7.9 billion online. But the other trend emerging is mobile shopping. This morning, a record 53% of visits to retailer sites, they came from mobile devices, phones and tablets. So where are the deals? Televisions, as always, folks there saving about 25% today on average. Toys, you'll see savings of about 20%. Computers, 15%. A lot of people are now saying, what's the point of Cyber Monday if the deals are comparable to what we saw over the weekend when so many of us, we ditched standing in line to shop online instead? Well, this is what the experts say. Black Friday sometimes whets the appetite. You start to compare prices, you do your research, and then on Monday, when you get to work, you do your, you pull the trigger. But quite honestly, it's a lot of trigger pulling because there's this recent survey from the National Retail Federation. 59% of respondents will buy gifts online this year. That is more for the first time ever than in the brick and mortars. So consumers are seeing the deals, they're liking the convenience of free shipping, flexible delivery options, and we are using our fingertips to do our shopping. So do the brick and mortars go away? Is the question.
It's easier.
I know.
You know.
Especially when returns are free too.
Yeah, but our bosses don't like it, you know.
Well, if you do it on your phone, they won't know.
Yeah, all right. I go on this Australian perishable site, and everything seems fine. All right, in the meantime, thank you, Lauren, very much. Lauren Simonetti, she's been on the air like for 24 hours straight now, so she's, you know, exhausted, but good reporting there. Meanwhile, I have a feeling if you are on Amazon, you work there, you're exhausted right now. Right now, that stock hitting another all-time high. It's fourth in as many days. In case you're counting, it has made Jeff Bezos easily the richest man on the planet. His net worth well over $100 billion, and that was on Black Friday. So he just keeps adding and adding to that. Now, of course, Amazon is expected to be a huge beneficiary of all of this online buying. And keep in mind, only about 10% of all holiday sales to date have been online. So the potential is enormous. And of course, Amazon is a big chunk of that. Deirdre Bolton on how big a chunk and what they're looking at today. Deirdre.
I am here this Cyber Monday at an Amazon fulfillment center in Robbinsville, New Jersey. This place is huge. It is the cubic equivalent of 59 football fields. What you are seeing here with this scanner, it is basically the last stop before the bridge. This is the last place that your Amazon orders go before they are put on this conveyor belt. And then right before they head to these dock doors and out the door to a truck that awaits them. So there are more than 2,500 employees at this Robbinsville, New Jersey center, and employees work 4 10-hour shifts per week. There are day shifts and there are night shifts. As far as workers go, the company overall is hiring 120,000 seasonal workers across the country. We've spoken with all kinds of people who are working in all kinds of industries before. Teachers come to mind. There are some even craftspeople who are here helping to load boxes, make a little extra money for this holiday season. Overall, consumer spending is expected to hit a record this year, $6.6 billion this day alone. If Americans spend that much, that is going to be a 16.5% increase over last year's number. Few reasons for that. Technology is getting easier. simpler to be ordering from, whether it's your desktop or your tablet or even your phone. As you can see here, this is a very active site this Cyber Monday. Back to you.
All right, Dieter Bolton, thank you very, very much. All right, in the meantime, you know the drill here. It seems that more of us are interested in going online than waiting online. Hence, holiday foot traffic, what it takes is going to go to a traditional mall or store. That's just not cutting it right now, but online is. Now, it is too early then to sort of crunch both of these numbers together and get an idea what it could mean. Let's go to Business Insider's Ashley Lutz. We also have Gary Kalbaum here and tech analyst Shayna Glenzer. Shayna, what do you make early on of what we've seen, certainly via Amazon and online, first off?
Yeah, I mean, these online sale numbers are staggering. And, you know, it really does signify this shift from going and stepping foot into a store. Even with the doorbuster deals, they couldn't get people to step foot in their stores. And this major shift to purchasing from Amazon, you know, over half of that sales increase that you reported on is going to go to Amazon this year. And that's just a remarkable number and kind of staggering when you think about it.
All right, guys, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to go to Mick Mulvaney, the budget director who's running the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and this has caused a dust-up because right now there are technically two chiefs on that consumer finance agency, and it's not going down well. Let's listen.
Set the place on fire or blow it up or lock the doors are completely false. I'm a member of the executive branch of government. We intend to execute the laws of the United States, including the provisions of Dodd-Frank that govern the CFPB. That being said, the way we go about it, the way we interpret it, the way we enforce it will be dramatically different under the current administration than it was under the last. Anybody who thinks that a Trump administration CFPB would be the same as an Obama administration Trump CFPB is simply being naive. Elections have consequences at every agency, and that includes the CFPB. I don't have specifics yet on how that's going to translate into action in terms of that new attitude that we're taking here at CFPB in light of the fact that the Trump administration is now in charge. But I will tell you the same thing I told these folks today is what's happening immediately. Effective today, we've put something similar in place here to what we did across the entire executive branch at the outset of the administration. I think at the outset of the administration we did a 90-day hiring freeze. We put a 30-day hiring freeze here at CFPB. Probably more importantly, we put a 30-day immediate freeze on any new rules, regulation, and guidance. Anything that's in the pipeline stops for at least 30 days while I get a chance to see exactly what's going on and kick the tires here at the Bureau. Additionally, there'll be no payments out of the civil penalties fund for at least 30 days while I get a chance to see what's happening with that. I think there's in excess of $50 million in that fund, and I want to give a handle on what that fund is all about before we start making any distributions. There's going to be obvious, important exceptions to this. I had a chance to talk with legal some today and enforcement today on some things that are going on in existing lawsuits. I'll be briefed tomorrow on the roughly, I think there's 100 or so lawsuits that the agency, that the Bureau is involved with. I get briefed on that tomorrow. Clearly, if there are statutory deadlines, those will continue to be met. If there are legal deadlines as part of litigation, those will be met. But in terms of anything that is discretionary, we're putting a 30-day hold on it here. Other than that, it's really too early to say how things are going to be different. I'll be briefed tomorrow on not only the lawsuits, but the enforcement actions, some of the investigations, some of the rulemaking that is in the pipeline. So I'll have more idea tomorrow as to what some of the next steps may be. Lastly, and then I'll take some questions, folks have asked me if I'm going to be here. Some folks in the press have asked that. Some folks here at the agency, excuse me, I keep saying agency, I apologize, the Bureau have asked. Yeah, the President has made it very clear he wants me here. And honestly, since my name's on the door now, I want to be here. I don't want anything coming out of here that I don't know about because it inevitably be linked to me anyway. So I want it to be good quality work that this administration can be proud of. So I'm going to be here roughly 3 days a week and be across the street at OMB about 3 days a week. I recognize that adds up to more than 5 days a week, but that's just life. I've been a small business owner before. I've slept at the office. I've worked 16-hour days. I've worked 7 days a week. It's not something new. If you've started your own business, I've done it more than once. You know that working a little extra isn't that big a deal in the final scheme of things. So with that, we'll take some questions for a couple minutes, if that's all right.
Director Mulvaney,
yes, sir.
You had the opportunity to meet with the President earlier today. What did he tell you about what he wants from this Bureau?
He wants me to fix it. He wants me to get it back to the point where it can protect people without trampling on capitalism, without choking off the access to financial services that are so critical to so many folks, and so many folks actually in the lower and the middle classes, folks who are trying to start their own businesses, people who are trying to break out, people trying to get credit for the very first time. We need to figure out a way to both follow the law and protect citizens as set forth in the Act, but do so in such a fashion that doesn't choke off the access to capital. What does that mean? The access to money that is important for so many people to succeed in their small business, in their private lives, and so forth. So that's the charge he's given me. We both share the belief that this particular bureau under the previous administration had gone too far over towards strangling access to capital, making it difficult for financial services to flow, and as a result, folks that we want to try and help were hurt. We're going to try and fix that.
Did he give you a sense of how long he expects you to be in this temporary position?
I think that's probably going to be up to the Senate more than anybody else. I know that the president is interested in naming a permanent replacement as quickly as possible, as quickly as the quality of the candidates allows. My guess is you'll see fairly swift movement on that. That being said, swift movement on the president's part has very rarely translated into swift movement on the Senate's part. So we'll see how long it actually takes. Yes, sir. We'll just go across the room.
Thank you. Barney Johnson with the Financial Times.
Yes, sir.
First, are you concerned that the district court could introduce some kind of injunction to stop you continuing this role?
Not concerned. I mean, the court can do whatever the court is going to do. That's fine. I've read the legal opinion of not only the Department of Justice, but more interestingly, not more interestingly, as interestingly, the legal opinion of the general counsel here that says the president's right. So my guess is the court will hear the same arguments from capable folks. If the court decides to issue a temporary restraining order me not to come in the building, I will absolutely follow the law. I want to make that perfectly clear. We follow the law around here. That's what we do in the executive branch. I'm not concerned about it. I'm going forward tonight and tomorrow, assuming that I'm here, and I'll be here until either the court or the president tells me otherwise.
And just second thing was, to what extent are your criticisms of the Bureau reflective of your kind of ideological commitment to small government?
I don't know how to answer that question. I'll talk about my previous statements about the Bureau. How about that? Yeah, my opinion of the structure of the CFPB has not changed. I still think it's an awful example of a bureaucracy that has gone wrong when it is almost entirely unaccountable to the people that are supposed to oversee it or supposed to pay for it. I still have the same fundamental principled misgivings about the way this bureau is structured. I think it is wrong to have a completely unaccountable federal bureaucracy. I think it's completely wrong. By the way, I'm just learning about the powers that I have as acting director. They would frighten most of you. They would probably worry you to think about how little oversight Congress has over me now as I'm the director, how little oversight the committees have over how CFPB functions. I think if you've really studied the constitutional nature of our government, you study the way that the bureaucracy is supposed to work, it would both frighten and disturb you that this agency is as independent as it is. And it doesn't surprise me, by the way, that this, to the extent we're having a succession challenge, as lodged by Ms. English, it doesn't surprise me that grows out of an agency that thinks it's not accountable to anybody in the first place. So no, none of that has changed. That being said, I can't change a lot of it because it's statutory. It's up to Congress to fix it. I'm running the agency as the law sets forward. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's okay. I do have a quick follow-up to that question, and then I do have a different question. But you have called the agency in the past a sick-sad joke. So how can you ensure the American people that you are the right person to lead this agency? Yeah,
actually, I think you go back and you look at the line. I think it was a joke in a sick, sad kind of way, which is slightly different. But again, the sentiment is the same. The reasons that I said that, the reasons that I still believe that this agency is flawed, are things that I think people back home would agree with. Is that, look at it this way, and this is how I explain it to people here today. When I was in Congress, if the CFPB did something to you back home that you did not like, okay, there was literally nowhere for you to turn for redress. You could not call your senator. You could not call the congressman. In fact, or the House of Representatives, you couldn't even call the president, because the only reason the president could fire the director is for cause. It is a completely unaccountable agency, and I think that's wrong. I think that citizens should always have some ability to hold the bureaucracy accountable, and they can't here. And that's why I think we need structural and legislative change to the way this place is run. That being said, that's outside the bounds of the director to fix. Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you find this power struggle between yourself and Leandra English to be awkward in any way? I know you said today went smoothly from your perspective, but do you find this power struggle, this battle?
I think it's more awkward for the people who work here and the people who know her. I don't know her. I haven't met her. She actually, I think I read a couple of headlines said there were 2 folks who showed up today at work claiming to be director. I can assure you there was 1 person today who showed up at work claiming to be director. She wasn't here. And I think it's more uncomfortable for the folks that know her and work here, not knowing what the future holds. But again, she's a private citizen. She has the right to do what she did. I understand she brought the lawsuit in her private capacity. I assume she's paying for her own lawyers because the CFPB is not. The CFPB did not approve that lawsuit. So to the extent she's purporting to be acting in her role here, I think that's not accurate. But she has the right to do that. And again, we'll move on here and let the courts do as they will.
So she didn't come to work?
I did not see her here today at all. I've been here since 7:30.
Have you had any contact with her?
I have not. But if it's okay, I'm just going to go this way. Is that right? That way I don't have to pick. Yeah.
Did you receive any, in your meetings with Bureau staffers today, did you receive any pushback against some of your views about the Bureau's work?
No, folks ask questions, and listen, I'm very candid with them. And I told them, look, I'm not here to shut the place down because the law doesn't allow me to do that. That being said, we're going to run it differently than the previous administration did, and I think they appreciated that. I think they appreciate the candor. These are professional people. A lot of these folks, even if they've been here 5 years, have been in government for 10 or 15 or 20. There's a lot of folks here who've come from other agencies. So they're very professional. They know the gig, for lack of a better word. So I hope they appreciated the candor. I appreciated the candor they showed to me. It was extraordinarily professional, and I have absolutely no complaints. I hope they don't either. Yes, ma'am.
If the law did allow you to shut down, would you?
If the law allowed this place not to exist, I'd sit down with the president and try and make the case that other agencies can probably do this job just as, or if not more effectively. That being said, if I had the chance to change it, to put it on appropriations and to subject to oversight to Congress, I'd do that as well. I have none of that flexibility as the director of this agency, of this bureau. Yes, sir.
Just a couple of things. Do you have any plan for her ongoing appointment, referring to the deputy director here? And also, did you have any specific regulations you can address while you're here waiting for permanent replacement?
To your last point first, no, I'm not in a position yet. I hope to be by the end of this week. I'll be here all day tomorrow and then all day Thursday, getting a chance to go through the regs that are in the pipeline and so forth. I think stuff that's out the door is pretty much, I don't think there's very much that I can do about it. Once it's gone from here, finally gone from here, I think the next step in the review process, for lack of a better word, would be a CRA, as much as I think the president just signed today. On the arbitration rule and so forth. So that's the ordinary course of business, and we are going to follow the ordinary course of business around here. Regarding Ms. English, again, I don't know, haven't met her. In the ordinary world, if you don't call, you don't show, you don't get you don't have a job the next day, but I'm not sure how it works here, so I have to find out what that's all about. Yes, ma'am.
Senator Warren has been critical of your leadership of this bureau, and today the president referred to her as Pocahontas.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the president's called her that a couple times before. That's probably not the last time he's called her that. I did think it was interesting that I have not seen the lawsuit yet. I want to make it clear. I don't know if I've been named as a defendant. I've heard a rumor that I have, but that I have been named. I've not seen the lawsuit, nor have been served with it. So I'm speculating about what's actually in the lawsuit. But I have read accounts that one of the assertions is that this agency needs to be independent. Yet at the same time, I hear today media reports that Ms. English is on the Hill meeting with Mr. Schumer and Ms. Warren, and it makes me wonder who she wants to be independent from. Does she want to be independent from everybody, or just independent from Donald J. Trump? So my guess is it is the latter, but I have no comment about Mrs. Warren's comments about me. Yes, sir.
Part of the lawsuit is that, as you just said, that you are a direct report to the president.
Yeah.
Disregarding what Ms. English is doing. Is that a concern at all? You also have a seat on the FDIC board. You have a seat on FSOC.
Yeah.
Should there be any concerns that an independent agency is headed by someone who is a direct report to the president?
My understanding is, first of all, it has to be, number one, that in order for the president to fill this spot using the Vacancies Act, it has to be somebody who is currently Senate confirmed anyway. And my guess is every single person who falls into that would report to the president, number one. And number two, and from a precedential value, this is how it's been done here. I mean, people forget the first acting director was the Treasury Secretary. So I I will be as closely tied to Donald Trump as president as Secretary Geithner and Mr. Cordray were to President Obama. I don't think that's anything different about any of the structures. That's why one of the reasons I think that the lawsuit may be ill-founded, because they're sitting here looking at me saying that somehow I'm different when actually it's the same as it's been used before. Yes, sir.
The language in Dodd-Frank actually allows Geithner, the Treasury Secretary, to set up the agency.
Right.
It doesn't provide for anything after that. Just for the record.
I'm sorry, is there a question there? Or?
Well, I'm just saying, so there's no concerns about the independence?
No. Again, I will be as independent from Donald Trump in this role as Richard Cordray was and Timothy Geithner were from President Obama. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us an update on what you think will happen with the payday lending loan regulations that just came out? And second, if I could ask too, Miss English, will she be allowed to come into the building if she shows up tomorrow?
Yeah.
And what would her role, in your view, look like if she did come into?
Yeah, to the payday rule, I think I'm getting briefed on the rules and regs tomorrow. I think that's already gone over to the Federal Registry for printing. I'm not really sure, but I'll have more details on that tomorrow. As to Ms. English, yeah, she wants to show up tomorrow. I think she's still employed here. I think her ID is still pretty good, or is still valid. We've certainly not taken any steps today to terminate her, if that's your question. Yes, sir.
So you said you haven't taken any attempts today. Would you make an attempt in the future to fire Ms.
I honestly don't know the rules. I know what the rules are in the private sector, but when you deal with in the public sector, things are very different. And I don't know if a no-call, no-show for one day justifies termination. So I have to find out. Look, we expect people to work. The folks who are here expect people to work. Maybe she took a vacation day, for the long Thanksgiving weekend. I don't know. So we'll find out. But we do expect people to work here. A buddy of mine actually wrote me this morning and said that only in Washington, D.C. could you get sued for actually showing up for work, which is what I got sued for today, apparently. So no, we're gonna go by the book when it comes to dealing with any employee, including Ms. English. Yes, sir, in the back.
You have two questions. One about your role as budget director. Do the American people right now, given that all that you're trying to do and all that Congress has historically failed to do regarding the budget, do people need a full-time budget director? What do you tell people who say, wait a minute, that should be a full-time job?
Oh, no, believe me, being budget director is a full-time job. There is no question about it. This is going to be a heavy workload for the next couple of months or weeks or however long I end up being here. That being said, I'm absolutely comfortable with the team I've put together over at OMB to cover this workload during this whatever period of time this turns out to be. And I'm hopeful to be able to put together a team here at CFPB as well that can do the same thing. I was very encouraged by the quality of the people that I met here today, the professionalism of the folks that I met here today. My guess is, while it's going to be a lot of extra work, we'll be able to do both jobs for a period of time.
And the second question is, you've been critical of the independence of the Bureau here, or the lack of accountability being the flip side of it.
Right.
But the argument for the independence is that Congress, the federal government, had not done anything, especially during the financial crisis, to push back against the big banks and the large financial institutions. What evidence do you have outside this organization that your administration has done anything to push back against Wall Street like the president promised he would during the campaign?
Yeah, I'm not going to relitigate the causes of the financial crisis and what did and didn't happen, what agencies did their job and what agencies didn't do their job. But looking forward, I do think you've got to raise a question as to what happened here. In fact, I asked this question today of the folks at CFPB, and I hope to get some answers tomorrow. I was disturbed by what happened with Wells Fargo, by what Wells Fargo was doing to their customers. I don't know if you all saw when the CEO of the company came before the House Financial Services Committee a year or so ago that I was on. I know what I want to know is CFPB gets a lot of credit for fining Wells Fargo. My question is, why did they miss it? What was happening here? So here we have, Elizabeth Warren's dream of what an agency is supposed to be, and their ability, their independence, and their ability to go anywhere and do anything and not have to worry about politicians. They get free money from the Federal Reserve. They don't have to worry about appropriations. They have been given every single tool necessary, I think, from the outside looking in. Okay, maybe I'll find out something different tomorrow when I'm briefed on it. But every single tool necessary to either prevent that from happening at Wells Fargo or at least discovering it. And they did neither of those two things. So the question becomes, can you really regulate out bad behavior. I don't think that you probably can. Are we going to fill an important role here to make sure we are looking over the shoulder of folks who are trying to take advantage of consumers? Absolutely. We are going to continue in that function. At the same time, to think that the CFPB is going to prevent the next financial crisis is probably a little naive. If it couldn't prevent Wells Fargo, you have to worry about that.
Though, you have an obligation beyond simply criticizing this organization as part of President Trump's cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do to fill that void that you just talked about? What are you going to do?
Yeah, going to find first. That's a fair question. Going to find out why. Again, I asked that issue today, and the folks here took it very seriously. I hope to get briefed tomorrow on the background of the Wells Fargo and a couple other things that have gone down in the last couple of years to find out what went wrong, if anything went wrong, and to figure out how we can fix that so that we can stop that kind of stuff next time. I think that's what any good director would do in these circumstances.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Yeah, anybody who hasn't asked a question yet? Yes, ma'am.
One of the things the administration has pointed to as evidence that you should be in this position is this memo from Counsel Mary McLeod. Was there any coordination between the White House and the council, or any conversations before she put that out?
Not that I know of. In fact, I didn't even know the DOJ was working on theirs until it came out. Yes, sir. Last question.
And would you rule out meeting with Ms. English if she does show up?
No. No, I mean, no, not at all. So, all right. Thanks, y'all, very much. We'll keep you on the loop as anything develops tomorrow. Appreciate your time.
All right, this might seem like an arcane financial matter, but it's causing a bit of a power crisis in Washington right now. Mick Mulvaney, who is ostensibly the budget director of the United States, and that's a pretty big full-time job in and of itself, is now taking over this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, what started this, and remember, this was an agency born in the light of the financial crisis and the suspicion that a lot of banks and financial institutions weren't telegraphed early for problems that they were building, derivatives, that sort of thing, that hurt average folks. So the argument at the time was to create this outside agency that would be beholden, certainly not to Congress, and wouldn't be beholden to them, and would have its own budget largely through the Federal Reserve and do its own thing, and would be sort of beyond the political pressures that ostensibly come to other agencies. And now the former director, Richard Cordray, had planned to retire, to leave that agency, and he wanted his deputy, Leandra English, to take over and be the acting director in that interim. The administration, the Trump administration, reacted saying, no, you can't do that. This is Ms. English meeting earlier today with Elizabeth Warren, who was the brainchild of this agency, and of course Chuck Schumer, and that was the reference that Mick Mulvaney made, that she was too busy talking to them and not doing her job, didn't show up for the job today. But it is confusing to workers there that this is what's going on, because they don't know who to answer to. But again, it comes at a time when the administration is going to try to force this issue that Mick Mulvaney's the guy, even though, and I think Blake Berman can attest now reporting from the White House, he was never a fan of this institution in the first place.
No, and you really got 3 different things going on here, Neil, with this story, which you kind of laid out. But let me break it down into 3. First, the political intrigue of this, in which you've got the White House, the Department of Justice, the CFPB's own attorney saying Mick Mulvaney is the boss here. He should be the one in charge. Then you've got Democrats and Leandra English. They cite the 2010 Dodd-Frank law saying she should be in charge. And now you got 2 different people who think they should be the head of an agency. With this now going to court, one of them showing up to work today, one not, sending emails saying don't talk to the other, and the like. That's the first thing. But secondly, when you look big picture, Neil, you now have a Republican administration. Keep in mind the CFPB was put into place by the Obama administration. Now Republicans are in charge, and you've got a whole different fundamental view from this new administration of what they think this institution should look like. For example, Mick Mulvaney called it an awful bureaucracy that's gone wrong. He said, I'm learning about the powers that I have, and it would frighten you. He said it's a completely unaccountable agency, and I think that's wrong. So now you've got Republicans who now have a new person in charge there who will try to remake this agency. That's number 2. And number 3, what you hit on right off the top. This is a big job. And you just heard from Mick Mulvaney say he's going to have 3 days at the OMB. He is the budget director, by the way, and 3 days over at the CFPB. And he said that's not adding up to 5. He's going to be working weekends. I was asking a senior administration official earlier today, Neil, whether or not this is a good idea with the government spending bill, or the need to fund the government by December 8th, to pull Mulvaney out of his powers or out of some of his OMB responsibility. And I was told Mick is highly capable. But there you saw Mulvaney. He knows he has a big job ahead of him.
Now, you need Senate confirmation for whoever ultimately going to be chosen to be the permanent head of this organization. Now, Mulvaney obviously wouldn't be interested. He's there on an interim basis. But that appointment could be months away, or at least approved months away, right?
And one of the things that this administration has complained about, if you remember back to the early goings, the early weeks, was where are the Senate confirmations? It was Sean Spicer at the podium repeatedly saying, you know, the Obama administration had this, the Bush administration had that, and we are significantly lower. They've had a tough time getting confirmations through. This could be weeks or months, but it's now weeks or months that Mick Mulvaney has 2 jobs.
All right, buddy. Thank you very much. Blake Berman at the White House. Let's go to Charlie Gasparino, Gary Kalpom. You know, I remember very well when this agency was formed, the idea was that it would do the job that the existing agencies that were supposed to do the job did not, whether that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FDIC, a myriad of other acronyms that supposedly fell short of the job. But, Charlie Gasparino, this is the same agency. You could argue missed the whole Wells Fargo thing.
Right, and just think about the job. The job was to prevent the financial crisis, which was caused over a number of years by a lot of things, including the Federal Reserve, another semi-independent agencies that kept interest rates too low.
And that agency, the one that technically is funding this one. Okay.
And that agency is the one that's still regulating the banks. This agency was always a joke. It was always, they really do very little. They don't uncover much. It's a huge bureaucracy, accountable to nobody. And by the way, if you're worried about the Fed being out of control, which a lot of people are for good reasons, it's an unaccountable agency, except for a few times the Fed chair has to go before Congress. I guess it's called Humphrey Hawkins, right? Before and he has to explain, he or she has to explain what's going on with monetary policy. This is unaccountability on steroids, because I don't even think that the head of the CFPB has to report to Congress. They might have to do a couple of hearings here and there, but his ultimate appointment, he's like his own guy or his own woman. It's really like a king.
Well,
and
you know, you raise a good point about the confusion it has in the financial community, but I would imagine if you owe to the fact, all right, it is the law, it is an institution set up now to do what it's supposed to do, that if you are supervised, Gary Kalpom, by this agency, and you have 2 people claiming to be its head with 2 very different sets of direction, that is a nightmare, is it not?
That would be a big problem if 2 sets of rules show up. Look, we had plenty of laws on the books, and the problem was the enforcement of those laws leading into the financial crisis. But as usual, they always overdo it, and in this case, just sheer total no accountability. If you recall, I do recall that they spent $55 million on taxpayer dollars to refurbish headquarters. That was like the first thing they decided to do before anything else. Right. So I think this is a good move. I do believe there's too much regulation out there, and without a doubt, the Trump administration is completely different from the Obama administration, and that's why you're seeing this, and that's why they try to force somebody down the throat of the Trump administration.
Neil, you have to ask yourself, could the CFPB ever stop the abuse that Fannie and Freddie, the 2 government-sponsored enterprises, committed in the market, where they were buying all these mortgages, essentially creating the atmosphere where, you know, anybody with a heartbeat and not even a job could get a 30-year mortgage. They're one of the main culprits of the financial crisis.
And yet they were left out of the smackdown. You know?
It's just ridiculous. I mean, this is a joke.
But Gary, you could argue here that if you you look at the rescue of financial institutions and banks, and many people winced at that a lot of them with their clever mortgage-backed derivatives and the too smart for words investment strategies, they got rewarded. Right? We can debate all day whether that was justified or not, and hence the argument that Elizabeth Warren has at the time for this consumer agency that would look after the little guy, and the fact of the matter is, that didn't happen in the case of Wells Fargo. That was something that Wells Fargo, through a publication in a small paper out west, was revealed. It wasn't this agency that revealed it, and I'm just wondering whether another layer of oversight, another agency, is going to satisfy those on Capitol Hill demanding accountability on behalf of average folks. It doesn't seem to happen, and this does not seem to be the case.
I put it in one term: overlap. That's what I think goes on here. Look, I've been in the financial industry forever. They have tons of rules and regulations on the books. I got to look over my shoulder every day, and I am absolutely fine with that.
Wait a minute, you have to do that with just Perino. That has nothing to do with financial titans. Yeah.
Look, unfortunately, there were bad players in it. And look, don't get me started on not one person being indicted from 08, because there should have been plenty of people in 6x9 cells. But there is something called, hold on one second, Chuck. Sure. There is something called overdoing it. And you know, you already have rules on the books. Let's have more. Let's have some that are exactly like the same. And all of a sudden you're answering to two people. That's not the way it should be.
Well, think about this also. How was the little guy really screwed in the financial crisis? I mean, you can make, I guess, a case that people borrowed, got mortgages that shouldn't get the money. They didn't deserve it. Therefore, they couldn't pay back their loan. Therefore, they got foreclosed upon. But that's how the little guy got screwed. He got free money that he shouldn't have gotten. I mean, this is kind of a joke to suggest the financial crisis was about ripping off the little guy. Listen, I'm all for beating up banks, and I beat the hell out of them, and I was ahead on many of the stories. But this was a far more complicated thing, the financial crisis, and beating the little guy.
Just remember one of the other outcomes of too much regulation. They killed the small banks and the community banks over the last 5, 6, 7 years because they painted every financial institution with the same brush. Now, you've seen in the last year, do you know why the smaller banks and the community banks and the S&Ls have had strong moves to the upside? On a bet that they're going to get some relief from all that they went too far the other way. And this always happens, Neil.
Well, there was culpability on all sides. You could say a Congress that was emboldened to try to make mortgages a birthright rather than a goal. It started there. A mess, and this is what it yields. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both very, very much. So all of this at a time when you have not only budget considerations and technically the fact we're going to be running out of money pretty soon, and you got to get that tax cut plan done. Rob Portman, the senator from Ohio, in the middle of it all. Next. All right, the president met with the Senate Finance Committee, right now its primary members, to talk about these tax cuts. Tomorrow, I believe he meets with all the Republican senators. The read on all of that with a very important player in both of those events, Ohio Republican Senator and Senate Finance Committee member as well, Rob Portman. Senator, good to have you.
Hey, Neil. Great to be on.
How did that meeting go today?
It went well. It is great to see the team working together, frankly, better than we did on health care, where you've got everybody working toward a common goal, which is middle-class tax cuts and getting this economy moving and increasing wages. And, you know, it's a very good structure on the health care bill. We didn't have that kind of unanimity. We certainly have it now in the tax reform bill. And my sense is the House and the Senate and the president are working very well as a team.
You're known as a deficit hawk, so much so you want to make sure everything's paid for, and that's a good way to be. But a lot of the, supply sider types say that limits the impact of the tax cuts that could be, because guys like Rob Portman are out there limiting how far we can go. What do you say?
I thought you were going to go the other way, because the criticism that we're hearing is, oh my gosh, this is a $1.5 trillion tax cut that's going to blow a hole in the deficit. That's not going to happen here if we do the right tax reform. We've got to be sure the policies are right.
But it is still going to leave $1.5 trillion more. That you're comfortable with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, we've got to work within the constraints here of a budget process that says that the growth over the next 10 years is only going to be a paltry 1.9%. I mean, we can't let that be the new normal. The economy has grown at 3.1 and 3% in the last 2 quarters, as an example. There was just a study out today, I'm told, that indicated we see better economic growth next year. But I think this kind of tax reform, lowering that corporate rate, allowing us to be competitive internationally, bringing back some of that earnings that's been overseas, repatriating it, a pro-growth tax code that gets rid of a lot of deductions and stuff in the code that makes it more difficult to grow jobs. I think we're going to see more than 1.9% growth, for sure, just because of the tax cuts and the tax reform itself. So,
do you think the support is there for that, Senator? You know, I ask in the middle of everyone trying to win over doubters like Senator Johnson, Wisconsin, all that. You have Senator Daines out of the blue in Montana, who said, as it stands now, I can't vote for it. I think for kind of the same reasons that Senator Johnson had doubts over treatment and equity for small versus larger businesses.
Yeah, well, first of all, on the deficit side, I think we've got 3 or 4 members who are concerned about that. And I think now they are becoming convinced that this is actually a very conservative approach. In other words, getting up to 2.4% economic growth, as an example, Neil, means that we're actually reducing the deficit. And I think we'll get there. I really do. This tax reform proposal will help us get there. The other issues that you mentioned with regard to small businesses, we're working through those as well.
So you think that guys like Johnson, you have a chance to reach them, Daines as well, because they were wild card developments when they opposed,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Ron Johnson was not a wild card. He's been talking about it. They're both good friends of mine, and look, you're going to have to talk to them directly. But I will just tell you that we were very careful in designing this with their help to ensure that the smaller companies, which are pass-throughs who pay at the individual rate, are also given a substantial tax break to be able to hire more people and to invest more in their companies and increase productivity and all the good things that are going to happen with this gets passed. So we're not trying to favor bigger companies over smaller companies. In fact, we give both the ability to be able to create more jobs and opportunity. And I think it's clear that that's what the numbers show. So we just got to
Well,
be
I
sure
don't know.
they seal
Every
the
time
numbers.
I look at a 10-year projection, I don't even know what I'm going to have for breakfast tomorrow morning. So when I see the 10-year thing, I get nervous. But it is the game the way it's played. I understand that.
It's a game. It's the way it's played, and we have to live within that. And it's a 10-year budget, so you have to say that within those 10 years.
But how do you explain to folks, Senator, who hear that and understand maybe what went into it to make tax cuts for corporations permanent, but not for individuals? They come back and say, "Oh, they're those Republicans, friend of big business and rich guys." You say what?
Yeah, well, 2 things. One, let's make it all permanent. There'll be an amendment on the floor to do that. We'll see how many Democrats want to do that. We only need 8 Democrats to do it, by the way. You need 60 votes. So if Democrats want to make the whole code, all these changes permanent, including the tax cuts for the middle class, that's fantastic. We'll do it. Second, you've got to have the corporate stuff be permanent if you want to see the investment, because these companies do plan out, unlike you and me, who don't know what we're having for breakfast tomorrow. They do plan out well beyond this 5 or 6 or 8 year period.
But what if those same companies, Senator, just plow the money they're getting into buying back their stock, into increasing their dividend, and they're free to do that. But if they do that solely and exclusively with all this extra money they'll be awash in, would you be disappointed?
Yeah, I would, and I don't think they will. By the way, if they do, they won't be competitive. I mean, the whole idea here is for them to be able to compete with these other companies around the world who are increasingly buying U.S. companies because our tax code is so bad. It's so broken that we have 3 times as many foreign companies buying U.S. companies right now, last year, as we did U.S. companies
No, you're right
buying
about
foreign.
that. The math favors that they do
They've
something
got to compete with these companies, so they better not just be trying to pad their retained earnings or just give out dividends.
That might be their native spirits, but we'll see. You know, Senator, I am curious.
You got to let the free market work.
Okay. I am curious what you make of Mick Mulvaney taking over this Consumer Federation Bureau at a time when he, as the budget director, is staring at, a pretty big deadline here, where within a matter of weeks, Uncle Sam could be running out of money. Are you worried that he's going to be sidelined or is stretched thin at a time when he can least afford it?
No, because I've talked to him about it, and he's got a plan in place, and he's going to have people there operating the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. It's an organization that needs to be turned around. It needs a new direction. It needs new leadership.
But
and
we
we'll
also
get busy
need a
quickly.
budget, right? We need money
to get somebody. Yeah, but I think he won't be distracted by that. I think he has now got people in place, and frankly, it's interim. In other words, we're looking for a new director to be confirmed as soon as possible. Gotcha. In the meantime, he's going to have to do both.
Senator Al Franken today said he's going to stay in the Senate. He's learned from this experience. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't know all the facts. I do think that we ought to have an ethics committee investigation right away. My understanding is, he's agreed to that. And let's get to the bottom of it and figure out what happened and listen to these women who are coming forward and treat them with respect.
All right, Roy Moore also right now a big factor in this race, whether he makes it to your, a very important august club of 100 men and women. Right now, he's even in the polls from being down as much as 8 to 10 points. If he arrives there, would you welcome him as a United States Senator?
Well, as you know, I endorsed the other guy because I thought that Luther Strange would be a much better senator. So, look, you got to work with who's ever here. I work with everybody, as you know, Neil, and that includes
but you wouldn't be among
Democrats,
those saying we're going to
independents,
kick you out of this club.
Again, if there's an ethics investigation, it needs to go through that due process. But no, I'm not going to prejudge
investigation that would be over charges that are decades old. Some of your colleagues say that's a non-starter.
Yeah, there's a process for that, and you need to go through the proper process. But he ought to get due process like everybody else, including those who are his accusers. And I've said from the start, he's not the guy I endorsed, okay? And I think many of these accusers have come forward and they have made very credible claims, and he should have to be held accountable for that.
Now, do you think, back to the tax cuts, sir, that we're going to have them voted on, approved, done, reconciled by Christmas time?
Yes, I do. I think it's very possible the Senate could move as soon as late this week with a Senate debate. And by the way, it's going to be wild because you'll have a very spirited exchange. Anybody can offer an amendment, and it can go on for days. And so we'll have a good debate, and I can't wait for it because I'm convinced.
When would the ultimate vote be? What's the latest?
Well, as soon as it could be, probably would be Friday or Saturday, and it could spill into the next week. But I think it's going to happen pretty quickly. And we know what the differences are between the House and the Senate. I think we know how to conference it pretty quickly. So I think for sure we can get this done to deliver for middle-class families in Ohio a nice Christmas present.
All right, so if you say you have a vote Friday or Saturday, let's say it's approved in the Senate, if you're right on that, then reconciling these measures, which are dramatically different, by which time do you think that could be done?
I think it can be done relatively quickly. The structure is very similar. Middle-class tax cuts, providing for a more competitive international environment, lowering the corporate rate. So it's very similar. There are some differences.
There are some big differences.
Well, we have a different approach, for instance, to pass-throughs, but we're trying to get to the same result, which is to try to help ensure that those smaller companies are on parity with the larger multinational companies.
Senator Rob Portman, always good talking to you, sir.
Thanks, Neil. Great to talk to you.
All right, the Ohio Senator Rob Portman, of course, a former budget director in his own right. So crunching the numbers, a lot of people now are sort of ticking down the timeline here because there's very little time to get this all done. Very, very little time. It's doable, but it's an uphill climb after this. All right, first some perspective on this, because this guy is the smartest of the smart. I'm talking to the Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack. Bob, I'm just talking to Rob Portman. He has an aggressive deadline, thinks it can get done at the end of the year, but I keep looking at all these things you point out to me that have to be done as well. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think?
A lot to be done, Neil. I mean, they've got to fund the government. We have this dispute between the parties over the Dreamers, and that's going to be part of the spending package. Right. On taxes, though, on this bill, I mean, Republicans have momentum. And it's not something I've said a lot this year, but it did pass the House rather easily. They're not going to get any Democratic votes, so it's all up to the Republicans in the Senate. And that's election in Alabama actually helps Republicans because they know they have to get it done soon because, number one, Doug Jones could win. Number two, you don't know where Roy Moore is going to be on taxes yet. You can't rely on him. So they've got to get it done, I think, before that special election, or at least before he's seated, which should be later in December.
All right, so that special election is the 12th of December.
Yes.
So you think the Senate could vote on this after this round-robin, debate, whatever happens there? Senator Portman was saying that they could vote on this by this weekend. Is that doable?
Yeah, I think it is, if they have the votes. And there are at least a handful of Republican senators who are saying, well, I'm leaning no, or I'm undecided. But I think most of them are just trying to get changes in the bill, and that's the only way you're going to get changes in the bill.
Did you see the Steve Daines thing coming from Montana? I mean, he had essentially the same argument as Ron Johnson about business treatment. But are there other guys like that out there?
That did surprise me, and I think it's just a leverage game, and certainly with Johnson and Daines, they're going to try to get those provisions changed. But I think the Senate's going to pass this bill, and there are discussions ongoing already between the House and the Senate to merge them and quickly vote. So it's never easy passing this type of bill.
So you avoid this whole I'm saying reconciling the two measures.
Yes.
Then okay. What do you think ultimately happens with John McCain?
Whether he supports this bill?
Yeah.
You can't count on him. He killed the Obamacare bill basically twice. I know we've talked before. He's voted against the Bush tax cuts. I don't think leadership can count on him. But I think others like Lisa Murkowski, who voted against health care, I think she'll probably be a yes on taxes.
That's interesting. So your bet is they can get this done, spending measures and all that other stuff. That's a whole nother issue, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah, they can.
Robert, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you. I'm sorry for the truncated time, but a lot of breaking news here. He is the Hill editor-in-chief, and there you have it. If his read is that this looks more likely than not, that's pretty powerful stuff there, with Republicans having a busy agenda, confidence that they can get it done. We shall see. We'll see you tomorrow.